first idea we had that there was something not quite right was we were sitting in the kitchen one night and we heard this kind of noise, you know, as if something was kind of a scratching noise. And I kind of looked around and I didn't take much notice, just carried on reading my paper. And then it got louder. It was coming from the loft above the kitchen. Crikey, I thought, you know, somebody's broken in, you know, somebody's taken the mickey. And it got louder and louder, and it was almost deafening. I know it sounds a bit odd, but it was really frightening, you know. And I says, right, I've had enough of this. I'm going to take a look upstairs to see what's going on. So I got myself a torch, an empty wine bottle. So right then, so I walked up to the bottom of the stairs along the passage, and I hesitated at the bottom of the stairs, and then I could hear the noise just as loud at the bottom of the stairs, which I thought was weird, as it was in the kitchen. So I crept up the stairs with a torch in my hand and an empty wine bottle. And I got top of the stairs, I turned right, went through the door, and I could see the door of the passage, which is about, you know, 10, 15 foot away. And it was rattling. Like this. You know, as if somebody was inside trying to get out. So I approached the door now, and I burst into the door with a wine bottle, and I flashed the torch on. There's a kind of a wind in this room. And a kind of a murmuring, you know, not a voice, actually, you know, as if somebody slowed the tape recorder down. Kind of a weird, strange noise. And then, complete silence. Almost an eerie silence. I just scratched my head and I thought, God, you know. Closed the door, went downstairs. Was there anybody up there? Nobody. What do you mean, nobody? There's nothing there, I said, you know. And I didn't sleep much that night, I can tell you.
Roddery is a typical Welsh hill farmer. He spends many lonely hours tramping the hills and valleys of North Wales with his dog, working his flocks and struggling to keep his farm going. He lives in an isolated homestead tucked away in a fold of the hills within the shadows of Mount Snowdon, and it looks peaceful enough. But the house seems to act like a sort of psychic beacon, attracting paranormal activity into its orbit.
I was sawing some wood, and I could feel as if there's somebody behind me. So I looked round, I couldn't see nobody. So I looked up onto one of the rafters, and there was an image of a man, an old man, hanging there. So I was spoken to the woman, the old lady who used to live in the farm next door, and she said that years ago, an old farmer had done away with himself, had hung himself from one of the beams there.
I was babysitting for Rodri had gone out to a party. And I wrote down writing some poetry on the table, and then after the middle of that I slept in the chair, and I woke up, and I could, you know, felt a heavy presence in the room, you know, and I got up and walked around the room so I couldn't see anything. But, you know, some fear came over me, like a fear of the unknown. You don't know what it is. And, well, I think the best thing I could do, I'd heard there were ghosts here, ghost spirits, and from Rodri. But I'd never seen him, and I never believed in spirits myself. So I decided to sing a hymn.
One morning I got up and was really bad poltergeist, you know. What I found out later was poltergeist. The whole kitchen was smashed, you know. Cupboards were wrenched off the wall, and, you know, and glass pickling jars were smashed, and the place was a heck of a mess, you know. And, you know, there'd been some strength because the cupboards had been old-fashioned ones, had been really pinned into the wall, you know, with concrete and bits of steel like that, you see. And they'd been just ripped off the wall. I thought, God, there's something wrong here, you know. And I thought, God, we've had a break-in, the vandals have been in and they've smashed the place up. But, you know, there was no break-in, and the dog was in the house. But the strange thing was that night, I didn't hear a thing. If somebody had created that much damage, I wasn't drunk either, no. You know, and that much damage, you'd hear something, but I didn't hear anything, you know.
And there have been many other similar events. Visitors to the house, for example, have talked of meeting strange figures. Some of the rooms have been left in a state of chaos with no apparent explanation. But over the years, the family got used to this state of affairs. They didn't like it particularly, but they came to accept it. Until last year. Then Mariana's brother, who lived in London and had a successful career as a barrister, suddenly, for no apparent reason, committed suicide. Like Mariana, he'd grown up in the Welsh farmhouse and had strong emotional links with it. It seems that he began to appear to her on a regular basis, as if seeking help. Mariana was extremely distressed and felt she had to take some action.
That was the time when I saw my brother at the end of the bed, and we'd lost him through suicide, and he wanted help. Then he was he's coming to me for help because he thought he couldn't leave this world. He wanted to meet up with his mum and the rest of the family, his other brother. So I was just getting so distressed. I said, I just wanted to move out to the house because I was just seeing my brother's image at the end of the bed all the time.
She came downstairs shaking and trembling and says, Audrey, says, I just see my brother standing at the bottom of the bed. And it really frightened her. So I said, right, that's it. I said, I'm calling the professionals.
As it happens, there is a quite extraordinary team of ghost hunters working in North Wales. The team is made up of 3 men, all of whom are very highly regarded in their respective careers. Elwyn Roberts, on the right, is both a research scientist and an acclaimed poet at the annual Welsh festival known as the Eisteddfod. The Reverend Roberts in the centre, no relation, is a priest with a special assignment to deal with paranormal events. And Elwyn Edwards on the left is a counsellor and also an Eisteddfod poet. They have a very strong working relationship, and they deal with the paranormal in a totally practical, down-to-earth manner.
Elwyn is the man who is sort of able to manifest them, bring them out and all that thing. And then I tend to take over and say, well, now what's your problem and how can we solve it? And if you said to me, what has been your work for the last 40 years? I say, well, I've been a clergyman, but I have been social worker for the spirits of many of the departed.
Putting people to rest. That's my main objective. And to let other people know that there are such things as ghosts, and to prove to them what we're doing, and to prove to them that these people have lived by showing them the marriage certificates of so-and-so or death certificates of so-and-so. I get it now and again off people. They tell you it's all in your head. Of course it is in the head, it works with the mind, but they don't realise that. And most people that I've seen, they're poo-pooing the story. No, there's no such thing, and it's a job to get them to understand, unless they can see them themselves, isn't it? And I'm sure if they did, they'd be frightened.
It seems that some possibly discarnate minds, if that's what the explanation is, I'm not suggesting that I believe it, they seem to be attached to places. Now the standard explanation is that these are earthbound spirits or minds which for some reason are some emotional reason perhaps are attached to a place or to a person that they don't want to let go, and for that reason possibly don't progress spiritually. And some of the work that we've done over the years has been to try and help such minds, if that's the explanation, when they cause nuisance for people living in houses and so on.
This trio of professional ghost hunters has, it seems, achieved a very high success rate across North Wales in confronting and resolving a whole series of strange, unexplained psychic events. They decided to set up a sitting, as they called it, to try to encounter whatever it was that was troubling Mariana. They held the sitting one evening in the farmhouse and claimed to have been totally successful.
Started talking in Welsh with him. I knew he could speak Welsh, but he'd been away in London for so many years. He'd rather speak in English, so he turned to English. And I asked him, what happened? And he said, I can't tell you. Why can't you tell us? I'm too ashamed to tell you. Well, where are you now? I'm stuck, he said. Everywhere is pitch black and I can't move. I can't move on. And Elwyn described things which he saw about him, connected to him. And Mariana's father had left us about 3 weeks before, or a month before. So I asked Mariana, do you mind if we get your father here? Try and help him move on. She said no. And all of a sudden, her father appeared. He was 80 odd. He appeared on Elwyn. So I asked him, what happened to your son? He said he's been a bad boy. And in the end, they both left. We've been there since, and they haven't appeared.
Whatever the claims, the facts of the matter are that Mariana's problem went away. The apparent sightings of her brother stopped. But for the trio of ghost hunters, that wasn't the end of the matter. For them, the farmhouse had a special quality, a special vibration, as they put it. It seemed to be a sort of pathway for spirits seeking to make contact. They decided to come back, to hold further seances here. In the lonely farmhouse in the valleys of Snowdonia, the three Welsh ghost hunters have now held several sittings with what they claim to be remarkable results. They claim to have encountered a wide range of spirits, not all of them from this area, what they call drop-in communicators. But some of them, they believe, actually are or were local people, who they can trace in the historical records.
Elwyn tells me, and Winnie, and all my sensitive friends tell me, when you go to a house, when they say, we've got a ghost, and you open up, it's like Euston Station in that house. There are umpteen of them, and you've got to trawl around until the right one comes along. It's very difficult. You can go home and you met 10, 13, 14 of them, but you haven't met the little fellow who's troubling the family.
The first man we had was Richard Wynne. And he had lost 6 of his children, and I found him. He lived in a place called Tynwine, and he went to chapel at a place called Rhydywernen. And Elwyn had the name of one son which had died, and he was called Rhys. And I found him. He died in 1823, but I haven't finished looking for him yet, but I know where to find him, I think.
At one of these events, they claim to have encountered an evil character called Harold.
Elwyn went into a kind of a hunch, and he said, God, he says, as something really terrible has happened in his kitchen. I can feel real hostility. And immediately, everybody in the room saw he changed. His clothing changed and his face changed. And I was standing up. And anyway, the medium changed, and this guy had his face down with this, but he had these 2 eyes that were looking up. The most evil eyes I've ever seen in my life. They were full of they were bitter and twisted. And there was a crease across his brow, and he looked really vicious, you know. And the medium says, I'd want him to take me over completely, you know. And we got his name, Harold. And he spoke, my name's Harold. And I had said, hello Harold, and he said in Welsh, Carrier Diawl, I mean, go to hell. He said to me, I said, oh my God, I thought to myself, you know. And apparently we finally got out of him that he used to court a girl that was a maid in this farm, the middle of the last century. And he used to come to visit, and the girl finished with him. I didn't want anything more to do with him. And we never really found out what happened, but something really bad happened in that room.
The ghost hunters decided to hold a sitting in the farmhouse that very evening. It was an extraordinary event, held in near darkness, in Welsh, translated for us by Reverend Roberts. It went on for about 2 hours, and there seemed to be many strange, inconsequential encounters. But at one point the medium, Elwyn, claims to have made contact with Harold again, and this time with Mary, the maidservant, with whom he had a relationship all those years ago.
What did Harold do in the next room? We know something dreadful happened in the other room. Tell us about it. Harold has been unkind. What has Harold done?
He's crying now.
Everyone is crying. The medium is crying. Tell us, Mary, what has happened. Tell us what Harold did. We're on your side, Mary. He's a nasty man, we know. We met him before. Something horrible happened in the next room. What happened? Tell us. Because he is hitting her with a poker. We knew all the time something dreadful had happened in that room. He's a nasty man.
After that sort of experience, we have to ask what on earth is going on. The problem always, of course, is one of verification. The medium can say what he pleases. It could all be pure fabrication. Most scientists tell us that it is, a load of old mumbo-jumbo. But not all of them. Some scientists are seriously concerned to test the hypothesis that some psychic mediums may be tapping a quite different communications channel and coming up with valid information they couldn't have gained in any other way.
Mediums are people who are supposed to be intermediaries between this world and the next. And there is no doubt whatsoever that there have been some genuine mediums in the sense that they have been able, over a period of time of decades, to obtain information that they simply could not have obtained in any normal way through the five senses. And of course, once you had ascertained that such people were genuine, then it became a question of whether they were actually acting as intermediaries between Uncle Harry on the other side, trying to convince the sitters that he had survived bodily death, or whether the mediums had the gift of abstracting all the relevant information from the minds of the sitters concerning Uncle Harry and then dramatizing that information as if it was Uncle Harry coming through from the other side.
The point is, of course, that parapsychologists don't have to establish 100 such cases, or even 10. One cast-iron case would be enough to indicate the possibility of a psychic channel of communication. A number of scientists have trawled the world for such a case. Professor Ian Stevenson, for example, tells an extraordinary story that comes from Iceland.
He came through and expressed great concern about not being fully buried. He said his leg was missing, and that when he'd been buried, they hadn't buried his leg. And to make a rather long story short, he later said that his leg was in the wall of the house owned by one of the sitters, which seemed quite surprising. But it turned out that the communicator was narrating details in the life of a man, an Icelandic man, who'd been something of an alcoholic, and he'd been at a friend's house, and on a stormy night he had taken too much alcohol and was drunk. He was urged to stay the night, but he didn't. He said, "Oh, I can walk home," and like all drunks, he staggered off, and then probably had some more alcohol with him and drank, fell asleep, and it was stormy and the tide came in, and he was carried out to sea. Then later the body was washed up, but it was without the leg. And so that was duly buried, what they had of his body. The leg was sort of left around, and finally it came to a place where there was some building going on, and the leg was actually, the person whose building it was didn't know quite what to do. They said, "Well, we'll just put it in this wall." And there it was, and they opened up the wall and found this leg. Now there's no evidence, you see, there's the weak point, no evidence that that was the right leg, but the best part of that is that the deceased was a tall man and the leg was the femur and of a tall person, so that's a little help there.
Of course, the question of communication raises the fundamental issue, the absolutely $64,000 question at the heart of everything. Communication with what?
Let's suppose that some of the mediumistic communications are fraud, some are self-deception, but let's make the assumption, just for the sake of argument, that some of them are genuine. Well, all that tells us is the medium has got access to information from somewhere. Do we know where? Well, no, not really. If the sitters knew it, then maybe it's a type of telepathy. Maybe there's some sort of collective unconscious, that all of the information we know is in the ether, as it were, and the medium can somehow pick up on it. Maybe there is actually a survival of bodily death, and the medium really is in touch with that person. Now, these are all theories. They've all been put forward to try and explain, the phenomena. I'm not convinced that any sort of mediumistic communication is genuine, but if it is, again, in terms of a theory, we're very much in the dark.
If we say that spirit simply means the mind, so we have a body, a physical body, which is made of atoms and molecules and so on, and I tend to believe that this is manipulated by this other thing which we call mind. Now, if mind is completely separate and independent, though very closely connected with body during our earthly life, then bodily death will not mean the end of the mind.
Elwyn is not alone in that view. Several notable scientists would support him. And there is no doubt there is a vast amount of evidence of psychic communication. Most of it is immensely fascinating, but much of it is also anecdotal and circumstantial. It doesn't create the cast-iron, watertight case that scientists are seeking. The jury is still out on the question of what it is that psychic mediums are tapping into to enable them to paint their view of the other world. But it is equally certain that nothing can shake the conviction in the minds of those who claim to have walked and talked in that other world.
What it's done for me, it has absolutely stabilized my faith. I believed before that there would be life after death, but with all belief there is a certain amount of that one, But in this particular case, I know now, without a shadow of doubt, that there is life after death. And I also find that if I could show you or any other person one single ghost, I would have gone a long way to proving to you that there is life after death.